March 2014. In a dim St. Petersburg apartment, where the night feels colder than the air itself, Pavel Durov stands alone beside a wooden desk scattered with papers, old notebooks, and a half-finished cup of black tea. The only light comes from a flickering lamp that throws long, uneasy shadows across the room. On the desk rests a sealed envelope stamped with the unmistakable red authority of the FSB. Pavel opens it slowly, almost reluctantly, as if part of him already knows what waits inside. 39 names appear on the page. Beside them, phone numbers, home addresses, and a demand so blunt it steals the warmth from the room. The Russian government wants everything: full access to the private lives of 39 Ukrainian protesters. Not criminals, not extremists. These are young medics treating the injured, students translating news, volunteers handing out sandwiches in Kiev's freezing streets. Pavel reads the letter again, and the silence around him thickens like fog. He knows exactly what this means. If he complies, those people will disappear into interrogation basements that smell of metal and hopelessness. If he refuses, the state will simply turn its cold focus toward him. For several long seconds he does not move. His fingers tremble slightly, not out of fear, but out of the weight of the decision pressing on his chest. This is not about money, not about a company, not even about politics. This is about the kind of man he is willing to be when the cost becomes personal. He turns toward his laptop. The screen glows in the darkness, the cursor blinking like a pulse waiting for his choice. His breathing steadies. His face hardens with a clarity he did not expect. Some people talk about courage. Tonight, he only has room to act. Pavel takes a screenshot of the FSB demand and, without a second thought, posts it publicly on VK. Within 60 seconds, the post erupts across Russia. 200,000 shares. Outrage, shock, a tidal wave of attention that cannot be undone. Pavel leans back, a slow exhale slipping from his chest. Not relief, acceptance. The moment he presses that button, he knows his life will not return to what it was. Then the sound arrives. Engines. Low, heavy, deliberate. He walks to the window and parts the curtain just enough to see the street below. 3 black cars without license plates glide into position, moving with the silent precision of predators circling their target. Men in dark coats step out, each of them scanning the building with the practiced calm of those who never announce their intentions. One of them looks up. Their eyes never meet, yet Pavel feels the message land like a weight on his spine. He has crossed a line the state never allows anyone to cross. His heart thunders in his chest, not with panic, but with the realization that he has just declared war on a system built to crush dissent without hesitation. And as the black cars shift into formation under the pale streetlight, Pavel understands one thing with chilling certainty. The system has already begun to respond. Years before he became a target, Pavel Durov was just a restless university student staring at a borrowed laptop, in a tiny dorm room where the radiator barely worked and winter crept in under the door. He stayed awake night after night, driven by a quiet fury that Russia's digital world looked nothing like the one he imagined. While Zuckerberg conquered Harvard, Pavel was building something for the East, a social network that wouldn't censor thoughts or bury voices under bureaucracy. At 4:47 a.m., with bloodshot eyes and fingers numb from cold, he launched VK. By sunrise, 1,000 students had already joined. It felt electric, like he had thrown a spark into dry grass. By winter, VK was everywhere, spreading faster than anyone predicted, and deep inside, Pavel felt something new rise within him. Not pride, purpose. He had built a platform the government could not control, and that meant they would eventually come for him. Despite VK's explosive success, Pavel remained an enigma, an entrepreneur dressed like a ghost in his signature black t-shirt, driving a black Mercedes, living in an apartment furnished wall to wall in the same shadowy palette. He laughed softly, kept his circle small, trusted almost no one, and carried an air of someone who knew too well what power could do when left unchecked. His only true confidant was his older brother, Nikolai, a math prodigy who built VK's deepest architecture. Together they rejected advertising, rejected government involvement, rejected anything that threatened their belief that technology should liberate, not control. Pavel's charisma wasn't loud. It was quiet, sharp, unsettling. People admired him, but the state saw something more dangerous than a businessman. They saw a man who could not be bought, bent, or intimidated. A man with principles. And in Russia, that was the kind of man who rarely survived without consequences. By late 2011, Moscow erupted into the largest protests in modern Russian history. Streets overflowed with chants, signs, anger, hope. Millions demanded answers about rigged elections, and almost all organization flowed through one channel: VK. Student groups, reform movements, volunteer medics, flash mobs, it was all happening on Pavel's platform. One night, his personal phone rang with a tone he didn't recognize. A stern voice ordered him to shut down several opposition groups. No explanation. No negotiation. Pavel hung up. They called again, angrier, warning him that he didn't understand the gravity of the situation. He hung up again. The next morning, 3 FSB officers walked into VK's headquarters. No shouting, no chaos, just a cold, polite conversation about stability. Pavel recorded the entire exchange and posted it publicly. Overnight, he became a folk hero to millions and a marked man to the only institution in Russia more powerful than the president. The line had been drawn. After the protest scandal, something around Pavel shifted. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was quiet, almost invisible, like a shadow that suddenly started walking beside him. Emails took longer to load. Strange cars appeared near his building more often. People he never hired suddenly appeared near VK's office as consultants. Meetings became tense. Investors spoke in coded language. The atmosphere around Pavel thickened with an unspoken truth: he had stepped into a game he didn't know the rules of, and the other players had been doing this for decades. He still wrote code late into the night, but now he stopped more often to stare at the door, listening for footsteps. The government didn't need to threaten him anymore. They could simply wait. Wait for him to slip, wait for fear to soften him. But Pavel didn't soften. His resolve hardened instead, and that resistance only made the trap close faster, tightening around him with every passing month. In May 2012, Pavel made a mistake, not a political one, but a symbolic one, and symbols can be lethal in the wrong country. During St. Petersburg's city celebration, he folded stacks of rubles into paper airplanes and tossed them from VK's office window just to observe how people reacted to free money. Chaos erupted below. People clawed at the sky, shoved strangers, climbed on cars, fought for the falling bills. Cameras captured everything. The stunt went viral worldwide, painting Pavel as a reckless millionaire challenging the very concept of order. State media jumped on it, calling him unstable, dangerous, unfit to lead a major platform. What looked like a harmless social experiment became the perfect narrative weapon. Behind closed doors, powerful men decided Pavel was no longer just inconvenient, he was unpredictable, untamed. And unpredictable people, in the eyes of the state, needed to be removed. Quietly, permanently, without warning. By early 2014, Pavel started noticing strange patterns in VK's ownership. Shares he never approved were quietly changing hands. Funds he'd never heard of were buying influence. Board members stopped returning calls. It felt like standing in a room where the furniture shifts an inch every night, subtle but unmistakable. Then one morning he swiped his access card at VK headquarters and the light blinked red. Denied. Security guards he had known for years suddenly avoided eye contact. Inside, his office was stripped bare, every trace of him erased overnight. At the top floor sat Ivan Tavrin, the new man in charge, leaning back in Pavel's chair as if it had always been his. He slid a contract across the table: 12% buyout, $300 million, and a warning disguised as kindness. Sign and disappear quietly, or face investigations that could ruin anyone in Russia. Pavel realized the takeover had been orchestrated for months, maybe years, and every step had led to this silent execution. He signed, not out of surrender, but because he knew the battle for VK was already lost. What the board didn't know was that Pavel had already started building an escape route long before they touched his throne. The night the FSB first demanded protester data years earlier, something inside him changed. He understood that any platform inside Russia would eventually be claimed by the state, no matter how fiercely he fought. So he prepared. Quietly, systematically. The 12 engineers who mattered most, the ones who built VK's core infrastructure, had all resigned the day before the coup. Their laptops, servers and archived prototypes were already out of the country, and in a private server in Cyprus, an early version of a new application waited. Fully compiled, a messaging system built on encryption so complex that even the creators couldn't break it. Telegram was not born after Pavel lost VK. It had been conceived as insurance, a weapon of digital freedom designed in the shadows. When VK pushed him out, they didn't steal his future. They simply handed him the moment to reveal it. Pavel left Russia with nothing but a backpack and the clothes he was wearing. No farewell party, no public statement, not even the comfort of knowing where he would sleep next week. The city that once celebrated him as the country's brightest young founder now felt like a set of locked doors. On the flight out, he stared through the small oval window, watching St. Petersburg shrink beneath the clouds until it vanished. A strange blend of grief and liberation washed over him. He wasn't just leaving a company. He was leaving a country that had decided he no longer belonged. The uncertainty was crushing. Would he ever return? Would he ever see friends again? Was this exile temporary or permanent? Yet behind those questions lived a harder truth that kept him steady. Freedom is rarely won by those who stay comfortable. And comfort was the one thing Russia would never again offer him. As the plane drifted toward the Atlantic, Pavel closed his eyes and whispered to himself that losing everything was sometimes the only way to start something indestructible. He landed in the United States with no home, no office, and no plan except one: finish the platform meant to outlive every government on Earth. He rented a cheap, unfurnished villa in Buffalo, New York, a house so empty that echoes trailed behind every footstep. There were no couches, no decor, only folding tables covered with laptops, wires, and cold pizza boxes piling up in corners. Pavel and his 12 engineers worked 16 hours a day, sleeping on thin mattresses or not sleeping at all. What they were building wasn't just an app, it was a fortress. Telegram was designed for the day a government demanded its keys. Designed for activists whose lives depended on secrecy. Designed for the silent battles Pavel knew would come. Every line of code was written with the paranoia of someone who had escaped a burning building and expected the flames to chase him. There was no funding, no board, no safety net, only conviction. And in that bleak Buffalo house, conviction was enough. When Telegram finally launched in 2014, Pavel expected modest traction. Instead, the world flooded in like a dam had burst. 100,000 users joined in the first day. 1 million in the first week. Protest organizers in Iran embraced it immediately. Hong Kong activists made it their heartbeat. Russian opposition members abandoned VK entirely. Brazil, India, and Turkey saw it surge as civil unrest erupted. Everywhere people were silenced, Telegram became the one door still left unlocked. What shocked governments even more was not its popularity but its resilience. No backdoor, no central headquarters, no political allegiance, and no amount of pressure could pry it open. Suddenly, a small team of exiled programmers had built the only platform in the world that governments could not fully control, shut down, or intimidate. Telegram wasn't growing because it was trendy. It was growing because people were tired of being watched. And with every download, Pavel understood a truth the world was just beginning to see. VK had been a company. Telegram was a revolution. Telegram's rise was so fast that even Pavel couldn't fully comprehend the scale until the first government tried to crush it. Iran moved first. Overnight, access to Telegram across the country was blocked, branded a threat to national security. On social media, police warned that using the app was equivalent to collaborating with foreign enemies. But instead of backing down, Pavel did what no tech founder had ever done. He simply bypassed the government entirely. He funded proxy servers out of his own pocket, millions of dollars, quietly pushed toward Iranian users who relied on Telegram to organize protests, share medical info, coordinate safe routes, and warn each other about approaching riot police. Suddenly, the app became more than a tool. It became oxygen. Every time the government shut down a door, Telegram opened 10 new windows. The more Iran tried to suffocate the platform, the more determined Pavel became. He wasn't just fighting for users anymore. He was fighting for people who had no other voice left. But the true test came in 2018 when Pavel's homeland declared war on his creation. A Russian court ordered Telegram to hand over encryption keys to the FSB within days. Pavel's answer was two simple words: absolutely not. The government responded with brute force. They attempted the largest digital shutdown in Russian history, blocking 15.8 million IP addresses across Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, and Microsoft Azure. The result was a nationwide digital meltdown. Banks failed, delivery services crashed, hospitals couldn't access online systems. Even government websites went offline. Yet while entire sectors of Russia's internet fell into chaos, Telegram remained untouched. It danced between blocked IPs like smoke in a room full of swinging swords, impossible to grasp. The more the government struck, the more they broke their own infrastructure. And as millions watched the collapse in disbelief, a quiet realization spread. One man with a laptop had just humiliated the most powerful surveillance state on the continent. The reason Telegram survived was a technique Pavel had been preparing for years. It was called domain fronting, a digital camouflage that made Telegram traffic appear identical to regular connections going to Google or Amazon. So when Russia tried to block Telegram, they were essentially forced to block half the global internet with it. Each time an IP went dark, Pavel's servers shifted, rerouted, regenerated, moving faster than any government firewall could keep up with. It was like watching a water current slip through a clenched fist, unstoppable no matter how hard the authorities squeezed. Russian programmers began spinning up their own proxy nodes overnight, cheering the resistance, turning the ban into a national joke. Pavel rewarded them with Bitcoin payments totaling millions. Telegram was no longer an app hiding from a government. It was a movement defying one. And every failed attempt to silence it only strengthened the myth surrounding its creator. Then came the moment no one expected. On April 30, 2018, thousands of Russians walked into the streets of Moscow not to riot, not to block traffic, but to launch paper airplanes. Each folded sheet of white paper carried Telegram's simple logo. Police arrived expecting violence, only to face a sea of citizens quietly tossing planes into the sky, filling the air with a drifting cloud of rebellion. One grandmother held a sign saying, "My grandson taught me Telegram. The government can't." A student shouted, "You can block our app, but not our voices." Officers hesitated. How do you arrest someone for throwing paper? By nightfall, the protests had gone viral worldwide, painting Russia's crackdown as both absurd and terrified. And when state television tried to attack Telegram, they accidentally showed step-by-step how to download a VPN, causing usage to spike by nearly 40% in a single day. 2 years later, with no public explanation, Russia quietly lifted the ban. The country had lost. Telegram had won. And the world now understood that Pavel Durov wasn't just building technology. He was rewriting the rules of digital resistance. As Telegram exploded past 500 million users, the world saw Pavel Durov as a renegade genius, a digital Robin Hood defying governments with nothing but lines of code. But behind the myth was a man living in a kind of exile that no news headline could capture. He had no home, no country, no address he could safely return to. He moved from Dubai to Singapore to Caribbean islands, never staying long enough for anyone to track his routines. Every airport felt like a risk. Every border, a question mark. He traveled with the same black backpack for years, not because he liked minimalism, but because he needed to be ready to run at any moment. Friends stopped inviting him to dinners because he was never in the same city twice. Journalists called him a billionaire nomad, but the truth was far less romantic. He lived in 5-star hotels with the soul of a man sleeping with one eye open. To the governments watching him, he was a threat. To the users depending on him, he was a guardian. But to himself, he was simply a man who had traded the comfort of belonging for the responsibility of protecting millions he would never meet. The deeper Telegram sank into the world's political struggles, the more isolated Pavel became. The people he dated eventually realized he was always one emergency flight away from disappearing. He learned not to get attached to cities, to routines, to anyone. Conversations with old friends became shorter, colder, strained by the invisible wall of danger surrounding him. Even celebrations felt hollow. Each time Telegram reached a new milestone, he would stand alone in a luxury apartment overlooking a foreign skyline, knowing he couldn't tell anyone where he really was. Intelligence agencies tracked his flights. Governments debated whether he was a hero or a criminal. Critics blamed him for extremism he didn't control. Admirers worshipped him as the last defender of digital freedom. But when the lights went out at night, none of those voices stayed with him. Only the weight of his principles did. There were moments, rare, quiet moments, when he wondered if the world he was fighting for even understood the cost he was paying. Yet every time he opened Telegram and saw people using it to organize protests, protect themselves, speak freely, he felt something stronger than regret. Purpose. And purpose, for Pavel Durov, was the only thing powerful enough to fill the silence his life had become. August 24, 2024. Pavel Durov believed France would be a brief and quiet stop, a rare place where he could breathe without looking over his shoulder. But the moment his jet door opened in Paris, 6 officers closed in like a silent storm. No warnings. No explanations. Cold metal cuffs snapped around his wrists as if he were a dangerous fugitive instead of a tech founder. They marched him down the stairs, ignoring every question, treating his presence like a national threat. Inside a high-security facility normally reserved for terror suspects, Harsh lights and endless interrogations followed. Investigators demanded Telegram's encryption keys, circling the same question again and again, as if repetition could break mathematics or break him. Pavel remained calm, answering with the same steady truth: I do not have them. Even I cannot unlock Telegram. But to the officers, it was never about the truth. It was about forcing a man built on principle to finally kneel. While Pavel faced interrogation, the world outside ignited. Russia demanded his release, calling France hypocritical. Snowden labeled the arrest an assault on digital freedom. Elon Musk mocked the situation, saying Europe now punished people for liking memes. Social media erupted with outrage. Telegram users surged in solidarity, flooding timelines with messages defending the man who refused to compromise their privacy. When Pavel was released on €5 million bail, stripped of his passports and banned from leaving France, he looked exhausted but unbroken. Standing before the courthouse, he posted one short message on Telegram, thanking users and reaffirming that privacy was not negotiable. Within an hour, 12 million new users joined. What was meant to weaken him had turned him into a global symbol of resistance. France tried to corner the man. Instead, they amplified the movement. And as Pavel walked into the uncertain days ahead, even he realized the fight had outgrown him entirely. Pavel Durov walks out of the courthouse knowing he may never be fully safe again, yet something in his expression has changed. He is no longer just the founder of an app or a rebel against powerful states. He has become the reminder that a single person, armed with nothing but conviction, can disrupt entire systems built to control billions. Telegram continues to grow, not because people seek convenience, but because they seek dignity, privacy, and the right to speak without fear. And Pavel, despite the cost, refuses to bend. His story is a warning, a lesson, and an invitation to question the world we live in. If this journey moved you, if it made you think, or if you want to keep exploring the hidden battles shaping our digital age, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to light, stories of the people who dare to say no when the world expects silence. Stay curious. Stay aware. And I will see you in the next story.